You know, you learn to recognize the symptoms after a while. That slow decay you see hiding behind the neon glow. A kind of fever of the soul, and it just spreads through the streets. I've seen it 1,000 times. This city, it wasn't just sick, it was a crime scene waiting to be processed. And I was the one called in to read the signs.
All right, let's open the case file. The subject of our investigation. Well, it isn't a single person. It's more of a collective consciousness. And the target is the individual who's lost inside it. But you gotta understand, this isn't a rescue mission. Think of it more like a clinical trial, a final prognosis. So the objective is crystal clear. We strip away all the comforting lies, all that stage makeup that's hiding a dying world. It's a procedure that requires a really steady hand, a total detachment from the patient's cries. We're treating a fever of the soul, right? And sometimes the cure requires a cold, clinical precision.
Now, our primary person of interest is a certain type. I like to call them the stargazer. They're the prime suspect in their own demise. And honestly, they're the key to understanding this whole city's sickness.
Okay, let's take a look at the profile. Notice its performative nature. The stargazer isn't just living, they are acting. They're playing a part for a totally empty audience, an indifferent sky. And this performance, that's the core symptom. It's this desperate attempt to manufacture meaning where there just isn't any.
And this one profile, it perfectly illustrates the bigger sickness in the city. We're looking at what the file calls an architecture of stagnation, a society built with streets that just loop back on themselves, totally designed to go nowhere. We see the Pharisees' paradox everywhere, where this big show of public virtue just masks private decay, and at its heart, a fractured ego. A psyche that's in constant agony from its separation from the grand silence, that natural, peaceful state of non-being that existed way before consciousness ever came along.
Look, to solve a case this terminal, you just can't use conventional methods. It won't work. You need a completely different kind of logic, a scalpel that's sharp enough to cut through existence itself.
This is the primary tool of the investigation, the old Freudian concept of thanatos. And it's not about malice, you see, it's about physics. It's this deep, instinctual pull in all living things to just return to the peace of the inanimate. The work I do, it simply facilitates this natural law. You could call it the ultimate therapeutic release.
So here's the crucial point. When the diagnosis is terminal consciousness, the only truly effective prescription is a return to zero. The end of the performance, the end of the fever, just a final, peaceful silence.
Let's move on to the interrogation phase. You can't just tell a subject the truth. That never works. You have to make them feel its weight. You have to apply pressure. We call the operation the wild hunt. It's a systematic trial, and it's designed to turn the subject's own reality against them. The whole goal is to shatter that architecture of stagnation, but from the inside out. And that brings us to the real central question of this whole method. How do you take the familiar, the safe, the everyday, and turn it into an instrument of absolutely unbearable pressure?
The answer is the ebony clock tower. And it's not just some structure. It is a psychological weapon. It looms over the subject's world, this constant ticking reminder of the final prognosis. Every single chime strips away another layer of their illusion.
There's absolutely nowhere to hide from it. It warps their perception of time, of safety, of their own self. Under its shadow, the stargazer is forced to confront the one thing they've spent their entire life performing to avoid, the inescapable truth of their own mortality.
So this is the climax of the interrogation, when the pressure from that clock becomes just unbearable. The subject's psyche doesn't just break. No, it transforms.
And what we see is a clear, three-stage metamorphosis. Feels like it's straight from Nietzsche's playbook. First, the subject becomes the camel, finally forced to carry the full, crushing weight of reality without any illusions. Then, from that despair, the lion is born, a furious, powerful roar of no against all the old duties and hollow values. That's the moment of violent self-liberation, and it clears the way for the final stage, the potential to become the child, a new creator.
So you see, the breakdown isn't really the goal, it's the mechanism. That intense friction from confronting the abyss, that's the very thing that forges a new kind of mind, one that creates its own meaning instead of begging for it from an empty sky. And this brings us to the end of the case. With the old self completely shattered,
the subject is brought to a final crossroad. A verdict has to be rendered.
And so I present them with the final choice. It's the culmination of the entire investigation. I call it the Crimson Gift.
And here are the terms. On the one hand, you have the logic of zero, the peace I originally prescribed, a return to the grand silence, the end of all struggle. But on the other hand, there's the logic of one, the difficult, painful path of sovereignty, to take all those broken pieces and forge a new self from scratch.
And this, right here, is the central paradox of the case. It's the ultimate twist. The entire operation, the pressure, the terror of the clock tower, it was never truly about annihilation. It was a crucible. The goal was always to see if something stronger could be forged in that fire.
If the subject chooses the logic of one, they become this, the sovereign, no longer a stargazer performing for others, but a true master of their own reality, an individual who has faced the void and chosen to create, not to dissolve.
They are no longer a symptom of the city's sickness. They are the cure, a force of nature that creates its own light instead of just reflecting a dead one. And with that, the case is closed. Not with an ending, but with a true beginning.